The NFL draft is in just a couple of months, and this is somewhere where the Georgia Bulldogs have excelled recently. Where have they not excelled recently, right? In all aspects. The NFL draft last year, 15 players drafted. It was the most ever. This year, they're not going to be as many players drafted, but they're still going to have a bunch of guys get their name called, and they're probably going to have anywhere between 3 and 5 guys get their name called on opening night in the first round. One of those being Jalen Carter, a candidate to be the first pick in the draft. Obviously, last year, Georgia's Trayvon Walker, historic rise throughout the combine and the pre-draft process, went from being probably a second rounder, towards the end of the season to all of a sudden this guy's number one overall. Jalen Carter, barring any trades or a quarterback being taken at 1, he's probably the guy that will get taken at 1. Now, I think there probably will be trades, so that's, we'll see. I can't predict the trades the way you can predict the picks. That's even harder to predict. But here is what some NFL scouts have had a lot to say about Jalen Carter, and just as recently, Daniel Jeremiah talked about all of the Georgia players in the draft and what he thought of them. And all those character concerns about Jalen Carter, I think, are starting to go away, finally, right? Ryan Curley from DAWGS here talking about Jalen Carter and the NFL draft. Love talking about the NFL draft with you guys. Make sure you're checking out Double DAWGS. We're close. You're about to get your copy of Double DAWGS. If you've ordered, go ahead and order that. All right? You're not going to get a better product, a better recollection of what happened during the 2022 National Championship run. The perfect season for Kirby and the Dogs. This is a shirt from the Red Zone. Nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. Guess what? That was said at this game by Kirby. Nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. Maybe there's nowhere to run, nowhere to hide from Jalen Carter. This is what Daniel Jeremiah said about Jalen Carter. I think Jalen Carter is the best player in the draft, and I think that Will Anderson is the second best player. But I know in talking to people around the league, and when I do mock drafts, you're trying to just get a feel on potential outcomes there and just doing the exact same thing every single time. I know that there's teams that have it really, really close, and some actually even prefer Tyree Wilson to Anderson just because of the size and the length and the attributes that he has there. But if you're asking me, I wouldn't be trading off of either of those two guys. When you look at Jalen Carter and Will Anderson, I probably wouldn't want to get out of it if I were them, as desperate as they are for defensive linemen. I think those are the two best guys. I agree. The top 5 in all these mocks that you see, Jalen Carter and Will Anderson get included pretty much every time. The quarterbacks, I don't think there's a consensus on who's going to be the first quarterback off the board anymore, right? Is it going to be Bryce Young? I'm seeing Anthony Richardson's odds skyrocket. I don't think he's worth the first pick. Look, my sidebar about Anthony Richardson, my 10 to 15 second sidebar. I know I've been a hater. I think he has all the physical tools. I've admitted that. I think that he's made some spectacular plays. He's got to get better at the quarterback position. It's not impossible for him to be a superstar in the NFL. I just think it's a long project if done properly. Anyway, Jalen Carter. Look, he is the best player in the draft in my opinion. Was Trayvon Walker the best player in the draft last year? That's a good question. Probably not, but his ceiling was so incredible. His physicals is so incredible that I was a Trayvon Walker truther. I'm not saying he wasn't deserving of that first overall pick, but it was the ceiling is what got him drafted number 1 overall. And he had a solid rookie year. For Jalen, this is a guy who wasn't on the field a ton just because of rotation and the way that Georgia plays defense, the way that Georgia's personnel works. Right, Jordan Davis and Devontae Wyatt were obviously in front of him in 2021 for the most part. But most people have always thought that he was better than those guys. Those guys are both first-round picks. Jalen Carter is going to go in the top 5 of this draft. All right, I'd be really surprised if he wasn't. I think the only scenario in which Jalen Carter doesn't go top 5, if everyone's healthy, the only scenario in which Jalen Carter doesn't go top 5 is if teams freak out, there's a bunch of trades, and the top 4 picks end up being QBs, and Will Anderson's the 5th pick. That's the only one. Because there probably are some teams that prefer Will Anderson to Jalen Carter, and maybe their needs are different. Jalen Carter is more interior, and Will Anderson's more on the edge. So they're not the same position, but they both impact the game in an incredible way. Jalen Carter impacts the game when he is on the field, right? He is an impact player. When he's on the field, he commands double teams. When he's on the field, he gets into the backfield very frequently. When he's on the field, he is throwing people down with one arm. He is picking people up with one arm. He causes turnovers. He causes sacks. He causes loss of downs. He causes attention to be drawn to him and blocking schemes to be favored towards him, right? So he is a problem on the defense side of the ball. An NFL team wants him. He is athletic. He's not the hugest guy. He's, over 300, but he's like 6'3", freaky athletic. Daniel Jeremiah called him a freak. He didn't fill the stat sheet, but he had games like this Tennessee game. It's up there. Like the Tennessee game where two forced fumbles, caused what should have been a safety. Bad call by the refs. I'm not afraid to say it. That should have been a safety by Tennessee. I don't know what they were looking at. Sacks. He impacts the game. He was definitely one of the handful of best players in college football. This is a guy who knew he was going to be a first-round pick, dealt with injuries this past year, fights with multiple injuries, knee and ankle, from the jump. Fights back, comes back, plays more snaps than he ever did before. I mean, this guy, it's incredible. Fights through the allegations of he has bad character concerns. Stories don't come out till months later, right? I think that helps you know that they're not fake, of him doing good deeds. He's a quiet guy. He's a guy that all the Georgia players have raved about in the locker room. He's an incredible talent, and he's going to go top 5. Is he the best player in the draft? I think so. I think he's the best player in the draft, and I've always loved Bryce Young. I'd put him in my top 3 with him, Will Anderson, and Jalen Carter. I think those guys are incredible, and if it was based on talent, those would be the first 3 picks in the draft, and they very well might be the first 3 picks. It just depends on what's going on. Quarterbacks dominate things in football, and they dominate the NFL. They dominate the NFL draft. You see great defensive players, great players in general, not go in the top 3 because quarterbacks take over need. It's a need thing, right? You need a franchise quarterback. So maybe the first couple picks are QBs. Jalen Carter slips a little bit. Hey man, my Falcons, if he's slipping a few spots and you want to trade up, go get him. Go get him. Because I agree with Daniel Jeremiah that Jalen Carter is the best player in the NFL draft this year. Links are down below. Double Dogs, Red Zone, DoorDash, all that good stuff. I'll see you at the site, dawgpost.com. Thanks for watching.